Hi, I'm Martin Osborne, a member of the EconJobMarket team. I'm going to show you how to select recommenders for applications you submit on our site. Let me begin with a couple of notes. First, we're constantly making improvements in our system, so the pages you see may look a bit different from the ones in this video. Second, you can use the timestamps in the description below this video to jump to a specific topic. To apply for a position on EconJobMarket, you first need to register as a user and create an applicant profile. Your applicant homepage will look like this. When you submit an application, you'll probably need to select some recommenders. We verify the identity of every recommender, so if a person you want does not already have a recommender role in our system, you'll need to provide information that allows us to verify that identity. The good news is that over 40,000 people with EconJobMarket accounts already have a verified recommender role. If your recommender is one of them, you simply have to select them. Also, for the vast majority of potential recommenders not in that category, the verification process is straightforward. Go to your recommenders page. Let's start with the simplest case. A person who already has a recommender role. Enter the person's name in this form and click one of the search buttons. In this case, there's one match, and let's say it's the right person. If their email address is current, right person, right email address is the correct option, and all you have to do is to click the Add Recommender button. Even if the affiliation listed is not current, as long as the email address is current, you can proceed and add the recommender. If the affiliation is not correct, the recommender can correct it themselves. The important point is that the email address is current, so that we can contact the recommender. When you click the button, Alex is added to your list of recommenders. Now, when you submit an application, you'll be able to select them as a recommender. That deals with this case, a person who has an EconJobMarket account in which the email address is current and has a recommender role. Here are two more possible cases. First, a person who doesn't have an EconJobMarket account. In this case, you supply the person's name and email address. Second, a person who has an EconJobMarket account in which the email address is current, but has no recommender role. These two cases are closely related. In both cases, in order for us to give the person a recommender role, you need to supply publicly available evidence from an official source that a person with that name owns the email address that either you've supplied or is in the account the person created. Most potential recommenders have a profile page at the institution that employs them that contains this information. Here's such a page. I've outlined the name and email address in red. The person may not want their email address widely broadcast, so I've obscured their username, but of course on the original web page their full email address appears. A publication or conference program that lists their name and email address is also good. If their institutional profile page has a link to their personal website and that site lists their email address or has a link to their CV which lists the address, that's also good. Or maybe there's a direct link from their institutional profile page to their CV which lists their email address. Another possibility is that they have an ORCID page that lists their name and email address. For most potential recommenders, the verification process is thus easy. Note that we are not verifying that the person you are requesting has a specific affiliation or job title. They can select the affiliation in their profile themselves. But we do need an official web page for the verification, and a web page at the institution that employs them is an excellent example of such a page. When you submit the evidence, we send it to an LLM, which makes a preliminary analysis of its validity. Then an EconJobMarket administrator checks that the LLM's analysis is correct, verifies that any screenshots you've uploaded correspond to the URLs you provided, and either approves or denies your request. For most requests that are denied, the reason for the denial is that the questions on our verification page were not answered correctly. For example, the applicant said that a web page lists an email address when in fact it does not. Almost always, evidence does exist that could have led to the approval of these requests. For example, the person has a publication that lists their address, or their name and address are listed on a conference program. Now let me show you the process of submitting a request for a person who does not currently have an EconJobMarket account, which is the most common type of request. Let's say your recommender's name is Michi Kumar. If no one with that name is registered as an EconJobMarket user, you'll see this result when you search. Click the Request Recommender Role for Michi Kumar button. You see a form in which you can enter her email address. If you were requesting a recommender role for a person who already has an EconJobMarket account, on this page you would instead see the name and email address in their account, and you would not be able to edit that information. But for Michi, who does not have an EconJobMarket account, you need to enter an email address. Then click Continue. Now you need to select her affiliation. Start typing a distinctive part of the name of the university or other institution that employs her. Let's say Michi is at the University of Nunavut. Then start typing Nunavut. If you start typing university, there will be hundreds of matches. You want to start typing an unusual word in the name of the institution so that you can find it quickly. When you find a match, select it. You can press Enter if it's at the top of the list. We have over 6,500 universities, research institutes, government agencies, and other institutions in our database, so there's a very good chance that the institution with which your recommender is affiliated is in it. But if it's not, click the link here to open up a form where you can enter its name, URL, and country. But in this case, we don't need to do that. Let's click the Continue button. Now you select the unit within the institution with which your recommender is affiliated, or if the unit isn't listed, you click the Other button and enter its details. Let's say that the Department of Economics is correct. Press the Continue button to move to the verification phase. What we want is evidence that a person named Michi Kumar owns the email address michi.kumar@ununavut.ca. This page leads you through the process of providing such evidence. It's important that you answer the questions correctly. If you give an incorrect answer, your request is going to be denied and you're going to have to start over. For most academics, it's easy to find appropriate evidence. Most university departments and research institutes have a profile page for each of their members that lists some information about them, including their email address, or if not, a page that lists all members of the organization with their email addresses. Let's say there's such a page for Michi Kumar with this URL. We'll call it her institutional profile page. If that page lists her email address, we click the Yes button, and now we have to specify how it shows her email address. Many institutional profile pages show the address on the first screen, like this one, for a faculty member in the Department of Economics and Business Economics at Aarhus University. For such a page, click the first radio button. For other institutional profile pages, you need to scroll down a bit to see the address. That's often the case if there isn't a dedicated page for each member of the organization, but rather a single page listing all members. If scrolling is necessary to see the address of your recommender, click the second radio button. Here's another example for a faculty member in the Humanities and Social Sciences Department of the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. In this case, it's necessary to click the Contact Information button to see the email address. If the institutional profile page for your recommender has this feature, click the third radio button. Here's a page for a faculty member at the Paris School of Economics where it's also necessary to click a button to show the email address. What happens when you click the button in this case is that a modal is displayed and the parent page is blurred. In this case, you'd also click the third radio button. The email address is visible only after you click a button on the page. Here's another case. For this page, for a faculty member at Carleton University, clicking on the link for the email address opens up your Mail app with the person's email address in the To field. In this case, if you hover over the link, the email address is shown at the bottom left of your browser window. For a case like this, click the fourth radio button. Now, if the first case is the one that applies to the page for your recommender, you're ready to submit the form. But if any of the other cases apply, there's one more step. You need to create a screenshot that shows the institutional profile page of your recommender with the email address displayed and paste that screenshot into the form. In the second and third cases, you simply have to take the action necessary to show the email address, either scroll down the page or click a button, and then take a screenshot. The instructions for doing that on Windows and Mac are on the page. In the fourth case, you need to place your mouse so that it hovers over the link to the email address, then press the key combination necessary to initiate a screenshot, and then drag out an area to capture. We don't need the whole photo here. What we need is the recommender's name and the area at the bottom left of the window that shows the email address. Then we go back to the form, click the paste area to activate it, and then press Ctrl or Command V to paste in the screenshot. Then you're ready to submit the form. When you do so, your request is submitted and you're directed back to your main recommenders page with your request listed. When an EconJobMarket administrator processes your request, you'll be notified. Here's something else that can happen when you click the Submit button. Suppose I submit a request for Elena Del Mercato at the Paris School of Economics. Here's the verification page. A click is necessary to show the email address, so I click this button and provide a screenshot. Now you click the Submit button. The system has checked the URL and found that it blocks access by other servers, or at least by our server. So in this case, I need to provide a screenshot of the original profile page in addition to the screenshot showing the email address that I've just provided. Once I've done so, I click the Submit button and my request is submitted. Now let's consider some other possibilities. What if your recommender's email address does not appear on their institutional profile page, or they don't even have an institutional profile page? Let's go back to the fictional Michi Kumar. If she has an institutional profile page, but it does not list her email address, then I click No here. That leads to the question whether her institutional profile page has a link to her personal website. If it does, I'm asked whether her personal website lists her email address. If it does, I enter the URL of that site, and then I can submit the request. If her institutional profile page does not have a link to her personal site, I'm asked whether it has a link to a CV that lists her email address. If it does, I enter the URL of the CV, which could be either a web page or a PDF document, and submit the request. If the institutional profile page does not have a link to a CV, I'm asked whether Michi is the author of a published paper that lists her email address, or she appears on a conference program that lists that address. A great way to find such a document is to search the web for her email address in quotation marks. If you click this link, the result of such a search will appear in a new window. If there is such a publication or conference program, enter its URL. It may be necessary to click a button on that page to see the email address. Here's an example of such a page showing a published paper. As on many similar pages, you click an envelope icon to show the address. Another possibility is that the author's email address is not listed on the web page for the publication, but instead is shown in the PDF file of the paper. Here's such an example. No email address is listed here, but you can get the PDF file by clicking this button, and that file lists the email address. Here's yet another possibility. When you click on the author's name, a modal opens, but it does not contain the email address. Instead, it contains a Mail To link. When you click the link, your Mail app opens with the author's address in the To field. You have a couple of options in this case. As in the case of an institutional profile page with a Mail To link, you can hover over the link and create a screenshot that includes the bottom left corner of the browser window, which shows the address. The second option, which is probably easier in this case, is to click the Download PDF button to get the paper. In this particular case, the author's email address is listed at the end of the paper, so you need to submit a screenshot of that last page. If the person you're requesting has no such publication and is not mentioned on any conference program, you're asked whether her personal page or institutional profile page has a link to a different institution that lists her email address, or whether there's a publicly available official document that lists that address. Here's an example of an ORCID page that shows a researcher's email address. If no such page or document exists, you're finally asked whether the format of her email address is name@organization domain, where organization domain is the domain of the organization with which she's affiliated. Then, in either case, you're asked to explain why there's no public page or publication showing her address, and to provide some details about her educational and employment history. Depending on the information you provide, we may or may not be able to approve your request. If your request is for a recommender role for a person who, unlike the fictional Michi Kumar, has an EconJobMarket account, one possibility is that the primary email address in their profile is an address they don't use for professional purposes, and their institutional email address, which they do use for professional purposes, is not in their profile. Here's the EconJobMarket user profile page for a fictional such person. Their primary address is on yahoo.com, and let's say there are no references to it in any publicly accessible web page or document because they use their institutional address for professional purposes, and references to that address do occur in their publications. In that case, the best option is for you to ask them to add that institutional address as the recovery address in their EconJobMarket user account. They do not need to change their primary address. When they add the recovery address, they will have to confirm it, and once they do so, you will be able to use that address as the one you verify. When you search for them on your recommenders page, here's what you'll see. Both their primary address and their recovery address are listed. Select Right Person, Right Email Address. When you get to the verification step, it'll look like this. You'll have the option to choose the address for which you supply evidence, and you can choose the institutional address. Now let's go back to the first question on the verification page. What if your recommender has no institutional profile page? Then one option is for you to provide a link to a publication that shows her email address, as in the examples I discussed previously, and another option is for you to provide a link to some other page or official document that lists her address. I've now covered these cases. There are two remaining possibilities. Your recommender has an EconJobMarket account with or without a recommender role, but the email address in their account is not current. If it's necessary for you to request a change in the email address, and in some cases it's not, then you will need to supply evidence regarding both the person's current address and their previous address. Many users have Gmail addresses in their profiles, which means they can log in and we can contact them, regardless of whether they still have access to the primary address in their account. They can change the affiliation in their profile themselves, so there's no need for you to request any changes if the affiliation is incorrect. For such a user who has a recommender role, the only option for you is to add them as a recommender immediately without requesting any changes, regardless of whether the affiliation in their profile is correct. The user Robin Aband is an example. All you have to do in this case is press the Add Recommender button. For a user with a primary email address that is no longer valid and no Gmail address in their profile, you may need to request a change in the email address. The first thing for you to do is to check with them that the email address in their profile really is no longer valid and they've forgotten the password to their account. If the address is still valid and you submit a request to change it, and we do change it, they will most likely not be happy, so it's in your best interest to check with them before proceeding. If they do want you to request a change in their address, we need evidence that the person who owns the EconJobMarket account is the same person who owns the email address you're requesting. So you need to provide both evidence that they own their current address and evidence linking them to the address currently in their EconJobMarket profile. Here are two ways they can be linked to the email address currently in their EJM profile. First, they have a publication from when they owned that old address that lists that address, and that publication is listed on their current institutional profile page or a page linked from that page. Second, their old address has the name at organization domain format, where name is a version of their name and organization domain is the domain of the organization with which they were previously affiliated. And that previous affiliation is listed on their current institutional profile page or a page linked from that page. The first link, via publication, is the best, but if their name is not too common and is clearly included in their old address, the second link may be adequate. Here's an example. My colleague Gabriel Carroll at the University of Toronto was previously at Stanford, and in the development system I'm using for this demonstration, his account lists his old address. He already has a recommender role, but the procedure would be the same if he didn't have one. I've searched for him on my recommenders page and have chosen the option Right Person, Wrong Email Address. I enter his current email address, I'm entering a redacted version here, select his current institution and organization, and get to the verification page. His institutional profile page shows his name and job title, as well as his email address, and no click is necessary to see it. Now I have to provide evidence that he's the same person who owns the existing account with the email address at Stanford. His personal website, which is linked to his institutional profile page, lists publications from when he was at Stanford, and this one, for example, mentions his Stanford email address. So I click this button and enter the URL of that publication. His email address is not on the first page of the publication, but at the bottom of the second page, so I click the second button, take a screenshot of the second page of the paper, and paste it here. The publication is listed on his personal web page, so I click this button, enter the URL of the page, create a screenshot of the part of the page that mentions the publication, and paste the screenshot here. Then I can submit the request. Other people may not have a publication from the time when they own the email address currently in their account, but there may be a conference program on which their address is listed. If there's no such conference program, the last possibility for verification is that their existing address has the name at organization domain format and their previous affiliation is listed on their institutional page, personal page, or CV. That covers the main cases. We've tried to make the verification process as smooth as possible, and we welcome suggestions for improvements.